Hello there. I'm Tommy. Welcome to Blitz Transmissions. This is the Blitzcast, episode 3. Before we get into the content of this episode of the Blitzcast, make sure to check out all the links in the description below. That being my Instagram, my collection page, which is a separate Instagram where I show off all my pickups for my personal collection. You can see part of it behind us here if you're watching. And also make sure to check out the Discord. I, along with many others in our community, are in the Blitzcast, the Blitz Transmissions Discord. So make sure to go check that out. Join the Blitz Brigade and become a member of this awesome community. I'm joined again by my lovely fiance, Jen, this week. Jen, how are things?
Things are good. Things are busy. Life just keeps rolling, but it's all good things. We're starting wedding planning stuff, and that's always fun. So
it's always a good time.
Yeah.
Totally. No stress involved.
No, zero stress. Very chill.
Anyways, aside from that, we're here to talk about important things like Star Wars. And so this week's topic was one that I came up with. Recently, Jen and I just finished rewatching the Ahsoka series on Disney+. This was one that was a little interesting for you because when we watched it when it came out last year, you still hadn't seen Rebels yet. If you don't know, I've been taking Jen through the Star Wars timeline chronologically. So Jen has seen a lot of the movies before we went through this big watch. And now we've seen everything in the Star Wars timeline chronologically. We just finished Ahsoka, putting us with the only things left to watch being Resistance and the sequel trilogy. So I'm pretty happy with how quickly we've gone through everything, considering we'll have been together for 2 years in November. Yeah. So that, considering we've gone through almost the entire Star Wars timeline on screen in a probably close to a year and a half, I'd say it's pretty good. Well,
we started watching whatever we started with.
Some of the Tales of the Jedi episodes, yeah.
I think in January or February when we first started dating, when we were long distance, so we were only seeing each other on the weekends. And watching an episode or two. So it is kind of cool to think of, how that's been a staple of our budding relationship. So that's cool.
So the idea with this podcast episode is kind of jumping from the thought of, I personally, after watching the Ahsoka series again, this is going to be my hot take. I think that the Ahsoka series is the best of all the live action Star Wars series. And that's where I'm at. And I will elaborate on that, get into it a little bit. Now, Jen, in your Star Wars ranking, Ahsoka also ranks as your highest Star Wars live-action series, obviously beat out by Rebels and the Clone Wars, as I think my ranking would be similar. Maybe Rebels a little lower, but the Clone Wars for sure being on top. How do you feel about the Ahsoka series as a whole, now that you've seen it post seeing Rebels? Has that changed anything for you?
Absolutely, because when we watched it as it came out last year, and I hadn't seen Rebels. I didn't like Sabine because I didn't know her character. I only knew Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, so I was in it for her, when I watched it, and obviously the flashback scenes with Anakin hit home, but the main plot of the Ahsoka season is Sabine and her growth, and all of that went over my head the first watch. Now, after seeing Rebels, and my ranking is the Clone Wars, Rebels, and then Ahsoka.
Yes.
And I think part of that is because the Clone Wars and Rebels add so much context to Ahsoka. I feel like you wouldn't really get it if you hadn't seen both of those series. So that's why they're above Ahsoka for me.
Yeah.
But now I know that all the decisions that Sabine made in the Ahsoka series were right in line with her character, right in line with the way that Rebels, the family in Rebels operates. So
yeah,
I definitely, I think Ahsoka rose from like third or second to last in my ranking.
It was pretty low. It was definitely low.
Up to third overall. Yeah. So
I think a big thing with the Ahsoka series is my ranking it so high comes from my knowledge of the characters from other media.
Right.
I think that, and it's indicative of what you did with your ranking, that the Ahsoka series is a love letter to Star Wars fans because it's written by Dave Filoni. You're taking characters that he has already written for years. You have Ahsoka, who has been around since 2008. So, I mean, the Clone Wars just celebrated its 15th anniversary in 2023. So you have, 15 years of this character being on screen, and then also the Rebels crew, so bringing all of these characters together really, Dave Filoni is really just kind of working with the best of both worlds here, putting them all in the same show and telling a story that really just complements everything that's been going on with The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett and a lot of the other stuff that we're seeing in this post-Empire timeline in the 30-year gap between the end of Return of the Jedi and the beginning of The Force Awakens. For me, a big standout in this show were the moments between Ahsoka and Anakin. I think that was probably, for me, one of the things that made me really elevate my ranking of this show is the emotional moments between Ahsoka and Anakin hit me on the rewatch. Something that I've noticed with a lot of Star Wars recently, and maybe it's just because of the volume of media that we've been getting, is I really haven't felt anything. Like on the first watch through, I'm feeling all the emotions, and when there's the big cameos and the exciting moments, I get excited, I get emotional, and then it's gone. I never feel like that again. Again, when I talk about all this stuff, I'm not talking about the animated shows because the Bad Batch will get me every single time, and so will Rebels and Clone Wars. But the Ahsoka series had that same effect, and that was something I just didn't think was possible with these live action shows. That was always possible for me to have such an emotional reaction to for the animated shows. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I totally agree because obviously the first time we watched Ahsoka together, we both got teary-eyed at multiple moments, especially with the first on-screen shot of Anakin with Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds.
And they just did it so well.
Yeah, well, it was the hey snips or whatever that I immediately broke down. So I didn't cry the second time watching, but I think I said multiple times, I'm like, that's just messed up. Like, that's cruel. That's cruel that they're throwing that in there. Because it is just so emotional, especially, you're seeing Anakin and Ahsoka in live action together for the first time. I think people don't really talk about that enough. Because that's such a huge moment, just seeing Ahsoka in live action for the first time in Mandalorian is a huge moment.
It is.
So then adding in Clone Wars era Anakin is just... And then you have the Rex cameo, and then you're just...
And the cool part for me...
mess.
I think what was great about the flashbacks, too, was, a lot of it was fan service. However, it was essential to the story. Ahsoka is a very jaded character at the beginning of this series, and we even saw that in The Mandalorian a little bit. A lot of people thought maybe that was just Rosario Dawson's acting for the character, but we came to find out that was always intentional. Right from the get-go, she needed to be a little stone-faced, she needed to be a little less spunky, a little less, charismatic like Ahsoka always was, as we always knew her. And that comes from a lot of guilt and a lot of regret and a lot of fear and in some ways anxiety about things that have happened, how things played out. I mean, the last time we saw her, she was in Star Wars Rebels facing off against her old master who was evil at the time and had given up, you know? And that was a huge, very, very powerful moment that completely rocked her world. And so to see her, you know, in the show, she still has to deal with that. So I think that was a very powerful moment. And it was great, though, to feel the emotions just as much as I felt them the first time on the second watch through.
Well, and that's making me think of, so in season 7 of the Clone Wars, you know, she's grown up and she's already a little bit jaded because of the way that she left the Order, and then you see her again in Rebels and she's even more jaded and emotional because she had just gone through Order 66 and she's fighting through those emotions on top of fighting a rebellion, and then this is like that next step of just going through so many hardships. And then, like you said, that moment in the World Between Worlds is her coming to terms with so many things, and it's essential for her story and her character growth. It's not just a throw-in moment. It's
not just a moment so that we could have Anakin Skywalker and clone troopers and blah blah. And that's something that I think a lot of fans get short-sighted on. I think it gets cheapened for a lot of people because they are thinking that it's done primarily for the fan service, when in reality, in this instance, it was done primarily for the character growth. An essential moment for Ahsoka. She literally comes out, everyone calls her Ahsoka the White, similar to Gandalf, when she awakens on the shuttle and the sun is shining on her and she comes down and now she's wearing the white robe, very similarly to in episode 6 Return of the Jedi, when Luke is wearing all black in the whole movie and he's kind of tapping into the dark side a little bit, and then when he chooses to lay down his weapon and he tells Palpatine he will not fight his father, the flap on his tunic falls down. You see it's white on the inside. And that's meant to represent that there is good in him, just like there is good in Vader. So that it's storytelling through the costume, if you will. The costume. The other Anakin moment for me that really, really stuck out was the one at the very end. And no words needed said, no exchange, no conversation. And that was one that got me. And it got me more on the second watch through that we did together versus the first. And I was really happy that it stuck, because it is, a very, very powerful moment. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, not to bring up the Acolyte, but
do it.
I mean, just with all of the points that you just made, I think that's where, because Acolyte is the last thing that we watched before rewatching Ahsoka. Yes. So everything with the Acolyte that I feel like they did wrong is what they did right in Ahsoka. Yeah. You know, all the cameos, the fan cams in Ahsoka, were done so well and so pivotal to the story. And then, but with Acolyte, it felt very gimmicky.
It felt artificial.
And then the dialogue / the acting, you know, there was moments where, you can feel the emotion. Just saying, "Hey, Snips," is enough to bring emotion, right?
Elicit a reaction.
And that ending scene, you don't need words because it's such a powerful moment. And I feel like there was no moments like that in the Acolyte, even when they were trying to elicit a moment like that.
I think that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, in the last time when we talked about it before, that was one of my criticisms, was you need good dialogue if you're telling, a new type of story. But actually, now that I'm thinking about it, as long as you have, real moments and emotional moments, then maybe I'm wrong with that.
I do want to also add to that point in saying something about the Acolyte that was interesting was they had 4 teams that each wrote 2 episodes. So that's why the show felt very disjointed.
Okay.
Because there were 4 groups of people writing pairs of episodes, and not all those episodes were in order. There was one group that wrote both the flashback episodes, and those are episodes 3 and 7. So it was very disjointed in that way. And I think that's another advantage to Dave Filoni being the sole, writer for this show, this being his creative baby, is he got to create the show with characters that he also created.
Yeah.
So for him, it was a very personal journey as well. And because he's already familiar with these characters, it made it a lot easier for him to realistically write them and have moments with each other that just feel like they make sense.
Right.
So much so to the point that, I know for both of us, Hera's portrayal is not our favorite of the show. However, it's everything she does, all the actions and decisions that she makes are still very in character for Hera, especially at this point in her life.
Yeah, maybe this is just because I'm a huge Hera stan. But I feel like there was moments where I wish she was in it more. I don't know.
Yeah.
I also feel like she didn't mention Kanan at all. Like, the only moment where they reflected on Kanan was with Ezra, which I think was a beautiful moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But there's all those moments where Hera's with their son Jason, and I wanted some more Kanan Hera moments. Mostly because we get the slightest bit of Kanan and Hera relationships moments in Rebels, so I'm like just grasping at straws for
give me more.
So that was, I was looking for some more of that. Also, this is just my own critique. I just think she looks weird. I don't think she looks like Hera. And we've been going through our Star Wars TikToks that we've saved.
Yeah.
I saw it was an edit with multiple female characters, and I was looking at Hera and I was like, am I just like crazy and I was forgetting what she looked like? Like, no, they gave her like really bright blue eyes in the live action. She has greenish eyes, like similar to your eye color in the show or in Rebels. And like, I don't know, it just looked costumey, and obviously you can't do a green alien perfectly, but comparing it to a cartoon, but I think it just looks weird.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think another aspect of this show that really, really elevates my enjoyment of it, it was its ability to, and honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say I think it did this better than The Mandalorian, was have all the familiarity of characters like Ahsoka, your Rebels crew, Thrawn, which we can also get into, but also introducing new characters and new concepts like Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. I thought they were awesome. You kind of get a little bit of everything in this show. You get some Jedi, you get some not totally Sith, but also dark side users like them who are kind of in the middle. You have Marok, who is a reanimated Inquisitor, who is reanimated by Morgan Elsbeth, who in this show you find out is a Night Sister, and then the Night Sisters are hugely essential to this story as well. So I thought the show did a great job of just kind of bringing in everything, all different eras of Star Wars storytelling, and it just it all complemented each other. It never at any point it never felt like a hodgepodge. Like I never felt like everything was just kind of being thrown into a bowl for me to go, googly eyed at. Like having Thrawn have stormtroopers that are literally willing to become undead for the Night Sisters is so cool. Having, Morgan Elsbeth get a blade at the end of the show called the Blade of Talzin, which is a direct reference to Mother Talzin from the Clone Wars. It just all felt like it was... I felt like the continuity was there. And it's something I feel like I'm missing in some of this new Star Wars media is I feel like it's disjointed from the rest of the universe. And I like when Star Wars feels like it fits with the rest of the world, I have noticed
especially with like Book of Boba Fett, like you have a pretty good underlying plot and the main characters and the reason they're there, but then you add in some weird new stuff that doesn't feel right, like the motorcycle gang of
Mos Espa Vespas
of Gen Zers. Like that felt weird, and then like the city folk versus country folk, and that's Tom's favorite part of it.
I was just talking to someone recently, I don't remember who it was, about how much I despise... I think it might have been the Sarlacc Digest guys, like shout out to their podcast, but I think I commented on their last one because they had just done a rewatch of the Book of Boba Fett. And I was like, dude, that is my biggest blaring issue I have with that whole show, was this whole issue they tried to throw in about people from different backgrounds learning to set aside their differences. I'm like, I don't even know these characters' names. I don't care.
Well, and I feel like they already kind of were showing that with the Tusken Raider, storyline. That was so much more profound
and compelling
and a part of Boba Fett's story than whatever happened in like the last episode.
I don't even want to talk about it. It's one of those things that I just roll my eyes at. I'm like, I love that season finale of that show. Book of Boba Fett's season finale is amazing in my opinion, because it reminds me so much of being a kid and playing with my action figures and like, oh no, like my two main guys are pinned down. Oh, here come the reinforcements, and it was just, the whole episode is super fun. And then there's just that one little side thing. I'm like, this sucks. Like it just, whatever, but whatever. Who knows why that was included, but.
Well, and that's kind of what I was saying is, there's moments like that where you're just, it takes you out of it.
Yeah.
But there's so much new in Ahsoka as well as the classics, and they do it so well, and it doesn't take you out of it. And it's like Baylan Skoll's whole character is so cool. Like he's like throwing in Jedi lore, which I love. I love Jedi lore. I love the mythical episodes. You get the Mortis gods, which, like, I'm a fantasy book reader, so any of that type of storytelling is super, super compelling to me. And so they just do it so well, like in that show.
I think that's a huge thing that this show really did for me. That I think that's the biggest continuity thing that Ahsoka did so well, and has me on the edge of my seat since this first season ended, anxiously awaiting season 2, because the Mortis gods were first introduced in the Clone Wars show. They got touched on briefly in the Rebels series, as they are connected directly to this world between worlds, and then here we are in the Ahsoka series, at the very end, all of a sudden Morai, who is the owl that is the representation of the daughter, shows up on Peridia, and Ahsoka's like, okay, I definitely know we're supposed to be here now for a reason. And then you get Baylan Skoll standing on the pointing finger of a statue of the father, flanked by a statue of the son and a statue of the daughter who has had her head cut off on the statue, pointing towards a light in the distance. You just built up a brand new plot for the next season of the show.
Yeah.
And it is definitely a cliffhanger, but if you know enough about Star Wars, again, this show is a love letter to Star Wars fans. If you know enough, then you know that something big is coming here.
Yeah.
And Baylan Skoll's been alluding to, he wants to end the cycle of power. He wants to destroy everything, and just so that there is no more continuous cycle of chaos.
Yeah.
Very much a Thanos type character, a villain that you don't want to win, but a villain that you love.
Yeah.
And that's why I really enjoy his character. Speaking of villains that I really, really love but don't want to see win ultimately, Grand Admiral Thrawn making his debut in live action was, for me, another huge moment. And so I guess I have a different appreciation for Thrawn because I've read some of the canon Thrawn novels from the Del Rey timeline. As someone who only saw him in Rebels and then some of Tales of the Empire, what are your thoughts on Thrawn in the Ahsoka series?
I mean, like, he's epic. I think he's a super interesting character. Like you said, it's like you like the way that he goes about it. I mean, in a weird, twisted way. You like that he's not just like a Palpatine striving for evil because they like being evil.
Yeah.
And he's such an interesting character, and I love the menacing vibe that he gives off. And you get the little touch points of him knowing who Anakin was, and
which is crazy.
Him knowing that, like, Anakin was Ahsoka's master, and what happened, like, in him just hinting at that was always cool.
The cool thing is that reference is a reference to the second canon Thrawn novel, which is called Thrawn Alliances. Basically, it jumps back and forth between Thrawn before he's a part of the Empire on, of all places, Batuu, which is Galaxy's Edge. Him and Anakin in the Clone Wars, Padme goes missing and they have to go find her. And then during the time of the Empire, they go back there. Thrawn goes with Vader. And Thrawn very quickly figures out that Vader is Anakin. And he becomes one of the few people that know Vader is Anakin. And knowing that, all that lore from that book, and putting that into perspective with this show in just such a subtle nod was amazing. And I really do appreciate, I've noticed a lot with recent Star Wars content that specifically comic books a lot of the times get retconned with, the shows, which in my opinion, at the end of the day, I ultimately would rather see the stuff on screen than and have that just trump everything else that's in like a book or a comic. But because I have such a personal attachment and I'm very partial to the Thrawn novels, I am very happy to hear that they seem to have kept all of that canon with this new version of Thrawn. Yeah. And that makes me very happy inside. Yeah. And
it's so in Thrawn's character to be the one that just
knows it,
figures it out.
Yeah.
I love him saying, like, "Oh, Sabine Wren. That's a familiar name."
Yes.
Like, that's just so. I love, in all aspects of Ahsoka, that they just keep characters consistent.
They do.
And I feel like that's another thing that's, kind of back and forth with some new Star Wars content, is just consistency.
Yeah.
Just depending on what they're going for whatever the show is. But that's such a cool moment, especially now that I've gotten all the context. And when we watched it again, I was like, that's Ezra, that's Sabine, that's Thrawn. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun watching the show. Another character that I was worried they wouldn't do right, that they did really well, was Ezra, as he's much older now.
Right.
He, at this point, he's in his probably mid to late 20s now. probably pushing 30 at this point. And they have that same, like, he has that youthful energy to him, but it doesn't come off as annoying anymore, like he used to be at times in Rebels, because he was a kid. But now he's definitely an adult. He's become a leader on his own, much more so than he already did in Rebels. And it's been really enjoyable in the show to see him, and actually I enjoy him more in Ahsoka than I do in Rebels, to be honest, because Space Aladdin was sometimes, now that he's Space Moses and not Space Aladdin anymore, I'm really enjoying his character.
One moment that I was like, oh yeah, that's Ezra, was when he's building his lightsaber and he's kind of like bouncing around everywhere and being kind of his ADHD self.
Yeah.
That was like, oh yeah, that's totally how he acted in the show, in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those moments where you could just feel it. Yeah, there's a couple of those moments. I'm trying to remember. I had one of those with Ahsoka where she was fighting. I can't remember. It was one of the fight scenes, and the way that she moved, and then they like did a close up of her face, and I was like, oh, like that's animated Ahsoka, and I just saw it, and that was some cool moments.
Yeah, for me, the biggest Ezra moment for me was when they're surrounded. And he's like, wait, we surrender. We give up. Like, and that was just, that for me, I was like, that's so Ezra.
Yeah.
For me, Ahsoka, I was on board with Rosario as Ahsoka right from the beginning when we first saw her in The Mandalorian Season 2. There was this one moment when her and Din Djarin decide to team up. She jumps up on the wall, she's cutting up the guards. And she's like looking with the lightsabers, and she kind of smirks and tilts her head. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, that was like straight out of the animation. Mm-hmm. This casting choice was perfect. And I think that they've done a great job. The actors and actresses as well have done a fantastic job portraying these characters. And I'm really happy to see how well of a job they've done. It's made it feel very authentic. And I think that's another thing about this show is how authentic it is. It doesn't give me that Marvel super corporate he's right behind me, isn't he? Like that was what I got with The Acolyte, and I got it with Kenobi sometimes, and some of these other new shows. It's just the way that shows are written now. Yeah. And that's something that I've accepted as a Star Wars fan. But there's just something about the Ahsoka series. And again, I credit a lot of it to Dave Filoni because he's done such a great job keeping Star Wars authentic, But yeah, I don't know. In watching the show through, I've come to realize this is the one I enjoy the most. I really, really enjoy The Mandalorian, and it's like just a hair lower than Ahsoka is. But for me, Ahsoka has that perfect balance of being able to let things breathe, but also not feeling too slow. The story is very linear, whereas, Mando kind of jumps around season to season on what the objective of each, story is. Ahsoka's doing that. Like, we're obviously going to pivot. We're going to be getting more... Obviously, I don't think any Thrawn in this next season. I think it's going to be entirely focused on, Ahsoka, Sabine, Baylan, and Shin for this next season.
Really? You don't think they're going to be jumping back and forth?
No, because Thrawn now is in the Star Wars galaxy. And he is the heir to the Empire, as the famous 90s novel by Timothy Zahn was, where Thrawn was first created, was introduced. I think he's going to show up as the big bad now. They kind of set that up with the Shadow Council in Mando Season 3. Okay. And with that, I think he's going to be like our main villain for this era of Star Wars. So he's going to bring all the remnants of the Empire together. And we're going to have, an unsuspecting New Republic with rats on every level, and snakes on every level of the government. And then you're going to have, like, the Adelphi Rangers with Carson Teva. You're going to have Carson's like, well, we need help. And you're going to have your team up with Mando and Boba Fett,
and that's the movie you're saying.
That's gonna be. I think that's gonna be everything going forward. I think it's gonna be Mando season 4, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. You know, I think Skeleton Crew might end up folding into this story tangentially, if not, you know, directly. And I think we're gonna get a lot of storytelling going forward, having to do with Thrawn as our big bad. I also know that there is an Heir to the Empire movie in the works, in addition to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. It's Dave Filoni's directing and writing, and it's called Heir to the Empire. So, very, very exciting. Now, what I am excited about, too, is Luke, Leia, and Han are in the Heir to the Empire novel. And we've seen a little bit of Luke. We've heard a little bit of Leia.
Yeah.
Han, I think, is somewhere out there. Same with Chewie. And I do think that they're going to show up in this Heir to the Empire movie, to kind of as a cameo. Do
you think they'll do like the CGI face that they did with Luke in The Mandalorian?
I'm in favor of recasting. I was happy to hear that they weren't trying to do the deep fake with Ray Stevenson for Baylan Skoll for season 2.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that they will do the same for Luke, Han, and Leia. I really like Alden Ehrenreich, who played Han Solo in the Solo film. I think he did a great job of playing Han Solo and not trying to play Harrison Ford playing Han Solo.
Right.
He did a great job. He's very faithful to the character. I think he could pull off Han very easily. I think a lot of people say Sebastian Shaw would be a very good Luke Skywalker, which I do agree with. However, the guy that they deep faked Luke's face onto
looks like him.
Looks like Luke. And I think that they could definitely get away with doing him if he can act as well as he can do the stunts and things like that. I think he'd be another fantastic choice. Replacing Carrie Fisher is very, very difficult. That's the only one that I don't really have anyone that comes to mind other than her daughter, who is a character in the sequel trilogy. I think her name is Lieutenant Ko Connix or something like that. She has a few lines here and there, but I think they could still get away with just making her Leia, you know.
Yeah.
But who knows? I do hope though that they just go that route, you know. I just don't think they're there yet. That's why they're just sprinkling it in.
Yeah.
They have to remind you, like Luke showing up in Mando and Book of Boba, which that did serve Grogu's story and helped him develop as a character and not be such a baby. Stupid, dumb little baby. But also with the Ahsoka series, another thing I really liked was the C-3PO appearance and the mention of Leia multiple times throughout the show.
Yeah.
Senator Organa, you know, General Organa as well. So that I think they did a great job. They're sprinkling it in. They're making sure that these characters are name dropped to keep it, you know, they're still in the fold somehow.
Right. I think it's almost easy to forget because and I just watched another clip of Dave Filoni talking about Ahsoka and how, you know, technically she's Luke's senior and you kind of you forget about that. And because those movies came out so long ago and this is all new media, it is hard to forget, or it's hard to remember where everyone lines up in the timeline. So Luke, Leia, and Han are still very much in the New Republic and in this new world that they're building. So because it really hasn't been that long since Episode 6.
Yeah, it's been 7 or 8, maybe 9 years now.
Right.
So it's been almost a decade. They're definitely going to be a little older, but I think it's a good way to bridge the gap.
But, you know, Luke's not in his hermit era. No. And Leia and Han possibly are still haven't
divorced yet. Which that would be cool, seeing a young Ben Solo who is Kylo Ren later on.
What?
What? I haven't seen that yet.
I knew that, actually.
But I think that'd be really neat to see maybe a young, like, kind of like Jason's age.
That's what I'm, like, would it be around the same
It would be.
age?
I mean, it would be.
Jason would probably be, like, a couple a year or two older than him.
I think they'd be right around the same. Maybe with, like you said, within a year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like Ben Solo would be a great appearance. You know, give Jason a little companion.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. But I don't know. There's a lot that they can do with the new characters and the old characters, bringing them together. And again, so far in this series, it feels very genuine. It feels very natural. I don't feel like the objective is a cameo. I don't like that. I think that's that's what the telltale thing is here. As I watch it again and again, my reactions are the same.
Right.
Whereas with a lot of these other shows, it's like, oh, and Cad Bane shows up in the Book of Boba Fett. Wow, that was cool. Moving on.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's the Grand Inquisitor in the Kenobi series. Oh, that was cool. Moving on.
Egghead,
Humpty Dumpty.
Well, to quote your dad, Ahsoka has rewatchability. So, which much more than a lot of the other shows that we've been dealing with.
Yeah. I'm trying to rack my brain here, make sure I cover all my bases. We're selling to you why Ahsoka, why it is the best live action Star Wars series, and I feel like I've done a good job of selling it.
I'm just thinking of. I really want to revisit some Clone Wars episodes.
Same.
Because that was the main thing that we were watching when we started this journey together.
That was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, so
that's the biggest show of them all, by far.
Yeah, so I want to go back and kind of watch some of those really pivotal episode sequences.
Yeah.
Because especially with Ahsoka and like moving into all this new stuff with all of these new things you were just talking about, because I want to remember how, some of those pivotal moments of like the Mortis Gods episodes, and not that I really want to torture myself, but rewatching those last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars,
the Siege of Mandalore, just
to cry. Yeah, and just kind of revisit those. I've been thinking about that.
You want to know what else is interesting? Dave Filoni has been on record saying that Rex is alive at the point of the Ahsoka series.
Oh my gosh.
He's very old, but he is still alive. Still alive. So, and again, I will say my one other thing is I like that they've still set up that the sequels and the events that take place are not disjointed. I like that a lot of these series are bridging the gap between two eras and kind of bringing the sequels under their wing to the rest of the franchise, because that's a big thing with the sequel trilogy is, if we didn't have any of these series, they would just be so jarring to watch after you've watched all this other content that already existed. And I like that these series have really brought them in. Like when Ezra asks Sabine, "Oh, and the Emperor is dead?" That's what they say. That's such a good answer, because you know that the Emperor is not actually dead by the time of the sequel trilogy. You know that the Empire is playing with Force-sensitive cloning and doing all these different things. And that's a big theory that I've had, is that the reason Thrawn is using the Night Sisters to help him get back to the galaxy is because that's the missing piece they need to bring back Palpatine, is the Night Sisters' dark magic. Because we know that the Night Sisters can reanimate people. Marok is a perfect example. All the Night Troopers, the Death Troopers that are literally zombies. And we see how decrepit and zombie-like Palpatine is in the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker. I think it makes perfect sense. You take the dark magic, you meld it together with Force-sensitive cloning, and you can bring Palpatine back to life. Not to his full potential, which, obviously we need the power of the Force dyad to do that in Rise of Skywalker, but bringing him back in some form.
Yeah.
So I think it's a perfect way. And again, you are seamlessly bringing in stuff from the Clone Wars animated show and the sequel trilogy and the prequels, and you're melding it all together to make it, and to me, in my head, it makes sense. So.
Well, and this is something that I think we've both said before, is the only way that Star Wars makes sense is by making more Star Wars.
And I have no problem with that.
So, I mean, when we watched the Clone Wars, so I had watched all 9 movies before. 10, including Rogue One.
Yeah.
So I had watched all the movies that had come out.
So you'd seen everything
before.
except Solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. So I was missing, obviously, all this context, and most of this has been coming out in recent years, but, like, watching the Clone Wars bridged a gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith that made you actually, I don't know, feel something in Revenge of the Sith. I didn't get why Anakin was all of a sudden, like, yeah, he had his, like, angsty moments in Attack of the Clones, but I was like, not enough to just start, murdering everyone. So, having the Clone Wars in there so that you feel it a lot more, you see the progression, and it's much more gradual because there's such a long time jump between those two movies.
You get to take a lot of time to explore these issues.
So, and they're doing pretty much the same thing with the sequel trilogy is adding in things to fill in those gaps so that when you watch them, they actually make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, any closing thoughts on Ahsoka? What's your closing argument on why people should watch the Ahsoka series and why it's the best? Ahsoka is great because Ahsoka is good.
It's good. It has great rewatchability. And it's just a profound show. I mean, it's very emotional. If you're just going off of Ahsoka's character growth, she gets to confront her trauma.
Yeah.
And we didn't really dive into all that, and I'm a psychology major. So. But she's able to literally relive some pivotal moments. I've said pivotal 3 times during this.
I didn't notice. I think my word this episode's been essential.
So she got to relive moments in her life that she hasn't even been thinking about because she's been so focused on helping the rebellion and moving on and finding her way. So it just is a beautiful story, even if you're just looking at her character. But then you add in all these other things and the overarching Star Wars plot.
Yeah.
It's just it's a good watch. It is.
Yeah. And again, it's a love letter. I've said it several times now. It's a love letter to Star Wars fans. And when I say that, I mean it. It has something for everyone. It's got something for your prequel fans, your Clone Wars fans, your Rebels fans, your original trilogy fans, even your expanded universe fans by including Thrawn and literally name dropping at one point the heir to the Empire. You have a little something for every fan, and I think that they've done it in the best way possible. So that's it. That's what we got. We're selling you the Ahsoka series, and we are saying Ahsoka is the best live action series that Disney Plus has produced, and I cannot wait for season 2. Any predictions for season 2, Jen?
Well, I know what your prediction is, so I don't want to steal that.
Okay. Say it, actually.
You think that Baylan Skoll is looking for the mother.
Abeloth, yes.
So, I mean, sure, I think that's gonna happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what Sabine and I want to see what Ezra is doing on the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they're going to kind of touch on that because, like, he gets out and Sabine and Ahsoka are stuck somewhere else. So
it would be a good way to break up our monotony of our story, by jumping, because we did that in the first season. We jumped back to Hera. multiple times. But then again, I know Dave Filoni has been on record saying that Hera is Thrawn's foil, and that she is his main, like, rival. So I'm kind of wondering if, maybe in that way Thrawn will be in the Ahsoka season 2.
Yeah.
Because if they keep up with Hera's story and now with Ezra, then Thrawn might make an appearance here. If
Hera is in season 2 more than she was in season 1, she needs some eyeliner. She needs a dewy finish to her makeup, not powder, not matte, not powder. And her contacts need to be different. And that's just my opinion. It throws me off, and I know that it's just hard to translate from animation to live action.
There's only so much you can do. It's gonna be jarring either way. But I agree with you on that. On that particular one, I do agree.
Just a little eyeliner, little contour. She's very, snatched in her animated form. Like, add some makeup. I know that you guys aren't listening. Don't
makeup
know.
Gurus.
Aren't makeup gurus, but like, girl, you know what to do.
Girl, a little too much foundation on there.
Too much foundation.
Too much
not
foundation.
Not enough other.
Not enough serums and potions.
You need a good moisturizing primer.
Girl, you're looking dry.
You look
dry.
Pretty dry, and I just don't want my girl done like that. She's
in her mom era.
Yeah,
but she shouldn't be looking like that.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching another episode of the Blitzcast. This has been a lot of fun to do this podcast, and just kind of as we're in between Star Wars shows, just picking up random topics on the fly and kind of thinking of something, and literally we had no script for any of this. We just kind of spitballed this for almost an hour, and that's because some of the most enjoyable Star Wars talk for me is that. So yeah, with that, make sure again to check out all the links in the description below. And also, if you're not yet subscribe to Blitz Transmissions, because I've got awesome Star Wars content coming out all the time. So with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I'll catch you for the next one, and may the Force be with you.